This afternoon, I will tell you a couple of things about the logistics sector and about the current trends. These are the findings of the strategic strand of PwC Greece, and those are the findings of our report.
Landscape here. So we will try in the next 10, 12 minutes to go into kind of to set the perimeter of where the major transportation logistics developments have been in the past year and identify what have been the major impacts that have forged, let's say, the supply chain and logistics industry the way we know it. So in short, we're going to go through some key industry trends, five, I would say, in total observations that have affected completely the transportation logistics industry. There's going to be a special call out of the effect of the war and what does this mean to the logistics industry. And last but not least, there's going to be a remark on what have been the major takeaways out of this reflection and where the biggest trends are in the months, but also possibly the years to follow. Going to the key, I would say, issues that we have identified for the past year. So remember, this is a study that has been compiled in 2022, but obviously, 2022, and compiles, of course, some findings that we've seen recurring since the COVID years. So a total of 5 key themes keep on emerging, starting with the fact that we've seen that at least the first half of 2022, so looking backwards, the growth momentum has been decelerated. We've seen the financial indicators, we've seen basically where things are with inflation raising, and all this has caused basically the momentum to slow down, but also to give kind of some supply chain shortages and broadening price pressures. Secondly, we do see, I think there is an issue with the presentation. We can keep on going. The second part of the key observations we've seen is basically the fact that the transportation and logistics industry as a whole is diverging. This actually means that we have observed that through this entire crisis on the price, starting from COVID, basically also inflated by the Suez Canal blockage a few years ago, and piled up by the fact that we do have a crisis that has originated through the war. We've seen that the overall freight prices have been elevated. So that applies across the transport modes, or the transport as itself, through the diesel and oil price increase. We've seen the same with the freight, the container prices, with air cargo. So overall, the theme is that the prices go up, and they have been impacted by an unfortunate series of different factors, geopolitically speaking, but also through the major COVID crisis. The third key observation that we've seen is that the M&A activity, so the mergers and acquisitions activity, is being, at least in the first half of the 2022, has been below the average of the past 5 years. Here it's important to mention that 2021 has been a record year with a number of M&A that we hadn't seen before. And it's also important to say that despite the fact that we are below this 5-year average trend in this in 2022 actually, we still see that they're fairly positive signals. And again, all these observations are specific to the transportation and logistics industry. On the same direction, we see that all the major deals have been aligned to what we see as a trend with the with the GDP growth. So eventually, we do see that the whole transportation logistics market is being adjusted to what we see in the financial market too. In terms of some important figures, out of that entire activity within the transportation logistics industry, we have seen a lot of activity up to the point of 50%, 50%, around specifically the trucking and logistics business. I'll come back to that in a second when it comes to the technology aspect of it. On the same direction, shipping is one that has recorded 16% total activity around the major deals that have been that took place last year. And then there's a small activity on the rail infrastructure, but not that significant to the extent of the previous two. Last but not least, on the five, I would say, major trends that we do see is the overall, I would say, trend of the industry towards some joint ventures and strategic investments, primarily in two directions. One is the integration of the logistics. So we've seen big logistics acquisitions and deals. For instance, we've seen that companies like MSC or basically companies like DB Schenker going into different services beyond their core offering and investing heavily on technology. So specifically on the technology side, what we have observed is that there is a trend and there is an appetite when it comes to the capital investments in two distinctive directions. One is the mobility technology, which involves a lot of activity. And it's back with us, but probably we can go to the investments, which I think is the most important part. So what we've seen is a big activity around two big dimensions, revolving around primarily the mobility technology, as I said before. For that, we have a lot of developments between, I would say that it's primarily in Asia, but we do see some movement in Europe. For instance, we've seen quite a strategic cooperation between Ponitron, which is a business within the autonomous vehicles, which is a very, I would say, it used to be kind of a futuristic concept, but it's something that now exists. So Ponitron has gone into a strategic venture with Sinotrans, and that's in the Chinese market, and that deal in total is about 100 autonomous vehicles. So basically going into the smart logistics direction, vehicles that can drive without any kind of human intervention on premise. So they can operate from distance. That is one. And then we see as well in the second pillar of where the technological investments lie, into acquisitions of big traditional players in the areas of shipping, or cargo, or generally transportation and logistics, into acquiring, for instance, logistics software. We've seen also freight forwarders going into acquisition of companies that own data. I believe it's safe to say that out of those generic themes that we have observed, there is a move of the entire, I would say, transportation logistics industry into going into directions that will diversify the risk, obviously, but also will help the companies gain more control over their supply chain. It's all around data. It's all around smartification of operations. We've seen that before with the Philips case. It's all around smartification of logistics, of vehicles, of operations, introducing a lot of investments around the area of transportation management systems. And that's basically a very generic overview of where we are with the smart logistics, where in the right-hand side you can see the top 3 themes in terms of technology around the transportation logistics industry, being all around transportation management systems. So in the end, companies want to have visibility basically on their prices. They want to understand the price breakdown. They want to have the ability for instant quotes. They want to be competitive. And overall, they want to have more control over what is happening in the market. We've seen a lot of investment and a lot of trends around the warehouse management system, so creating smart warehouses with robotic facilities, like the example we saw before with the robot arms, for instance. That's something that we have observed globally, but also coming more aggressively in Europe and potentially affecting, obviously, our home here. And last but not least, there is an integration effort between all the logistics technology and the CRM systems. That is heavily powered by the boom, the surge of e-commerce activity, where ideally we want to shrink the lead times and be able to be very responsive to any demand signal that comes on top. With that, and my last kind of remark here is that, of course, smart logistics, technology, and everything in that dimension is one part of the game. Smart logistics is identified to be the area with the highest savings and the biggest kind of return on investment because it's more transactional, more into the executional space. However, it's a part of a connected ecosystem. It's part of a wider picture. Given that the supply chain ecosystem, of course, is one that has proven to be mostly reflecting all the geopolitical changes that we've seen. All this turbulence around the supply chain has led to a lot of effort around gaining control over supply chains, creating the conditions for being agile, responsive, but also decoupling the risks and entering into new business models like, for instance, transportation and logistics marketplaces. And with that, I will conclude my part here, and thanks a lot for your attendance.